Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to do the last 10 books tag, which has been going around a bit in BookTube, and I saw it in particular on Sarah Reed's channel, which I'll put in the description, and she kindly invited anyone else to do it, so here I am. We're going to go through the 10 questions of the tag, starting with the first one. What is the last book you did not finish? So, there are a few of them because I have absolutely no problem not finishing a book if I'm not, in the mood. There are a couple that I won't mention because I'm pretty sure I will get back to them. I just got a bit bored with the style for a bit, and so I've picked up another book. But to me, that's not really a complete DNF. The one book that I am sure I will not get back into is Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson. This one was actually really interesting because when I started reading, I was really into it. It's basically the author going through how she's living her life, trying to be as happy as possible by doing like crazy things. And it's written in a very sort of funny and witty way, which I actually really enjoyed. The problem is that after maybe like half of the book, it was getting very not quite repetitive because it's different things, but nothing really happens. It's just stories after stories of crazy things that she has been doing, and there's no sense of progress or where it's going to get to. And so after a while, I just got bored. So unfortunately, I DNF'd this one. Second book is last book I reread. I don't do that very often, actually. I don't think I've ever done it except one. And that's mostly because I have so much FOMO on all the books that I'll never manage to get to that I feel sometimes like if I'm going to reread a book, it's a bit of a waste of time. And I'm sure a lot of people will disagree on that. But yeah, I have reread though The Little Prince by Antoine de St-Exupery, because that's probably one of my favorite books ever. It basically is about a little prince who lives on a very small planet with a rose, and it decides to go on a travel around space a bit, but meeting different characters. And it can be actually a children's book, but I think there are so many sort of philosophical elements and things to make you think that you can absolutely love it if you're an adult. And I love it. I have to say this is probably the only book that I would recommend reading in French if you can. I typically don't really care because nowadays like translations are often very good, but this one I have an issue with the English version. And that's not the fault of the translator, it's just that there is a word being used. So it's in the chapter with the fox, where the little prince meets a fox, and the fox asks him to please tame it. And the little prince asks, what does it mean to tame someone or something? And the little fox explains that taming is about getting to know someone, and by taming someone, that someone becomes unique to the other person. And I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful chapter. If you don't want to read the whole book, just find this chapter online and read it. The problem is that the word tame, I feel like in English has quite an aggressive connotation, and in French, the word apprivoiser just means something a lot more subtle, a bit more like a horse whisperer. It actually means sort of approaching a situation. You can actually in French say apprivoiser a situation by saying, successfully managing a situation. So I have a problem with like taming being quite aggressive in my mind, but I don't even know if that's fair. It's just the image that it conjures in my mind that is not quite what it is in French. In French, it's just beautiful, this idea of apprivoiser someone. I do have some plans to reread another book, and that's The Realm of the Elderlings by Hobb. I love this book. I think I started it like 15 years ago when I was at uni, and it's just such a beautiful story and I love it. But the problem is I don't even remember like some of the details because it's been such a long time ago. And recently Hobb has published a new edition of the first trilogy, with illustrations by Magali Villeneuve, and it's beautiful. So I have been buying them. I'm just going to show you one illustration. I don't know if you can see that, but it's beautiful. So I do actually want at some point to get to it, to really get back into the realm of the Elderlings and Fits, which I love. Number 4, number 3, last book you bought. So the last book I bought was actually a subscription box that I received just yesterday, and so I opened it today. It's my Chronicle box. It's absolutely not sponsored, but I'll put it in the description. It's a quarterly subscription that I chose on sci-fi and fantasy. I couldn't find a lot of just fantasy subscription. It's a very hard word. Subscription. I couldn't find a lot of fantasy boxes in the UK, so I had to go for a sci-fi fantasy, even though I'm less of a sci-fi fan. But I was super happy about the books that I received yesterday. They were all packed super neatly, so it felt very much like opening gifts. I was like a kid at Christmas. And it came with a signed book plate for each book, which, to be honest, I don't really care about. But it came also with a lovely little letter from the author of each book that sort of gives a tiny bit of context as to how or why they actually wrote the book, which I thought was super interesting. So the idea for me to get a subscription box is that I can actually sort of discover books that maybe I wouldn't have picked up by myself. So the first book that we had in the box was Skyward by Aliya Whiteley, which is apparently a sci-fi book. I'm just going to read the synopsis. Drink down the brew and dream of a better earth. Skyward Inn, within the high walls of the Western Protectorate, is a place of safety where people come together to tell stories of the time before the war with Kita. But safety from what? Kita surrendered without complaint when Earth invaded. Innkeepers Jem and Isley, veterans from either side, have regrets but few scars. Their peace is disturbed when a visitor known to Isley comes to the inn asking for help, bringing reminders of an unnerving past and triggering an uncertain future. Did humanity really win the war? I don't really know what to expect, but it seems like quite an interesting one, and it actually has some quotes on the back from other sci-fi authors, including an amazing one from Adrian Tchaikovsky, saying, intense and consuming writing, constantly challenging expectations. That sounds really good. And I had a quick check of the reviews on Goodreads, and apparently something that comes back quite often is the fact that the people had never read something like that. So I'm really intrigued. I think that could be really cool. Just as an aside, in the little letter that the author actually wrote, she says that she was very much inspired by Daphne du Maurier, which I have not read, but if you're a fan of this author, maybe this one is for you as well. So the second one in the box was The Crowfolk by Mark Stay. Again, I've never heard of this book, but it's set during the Second World War in Europe, I think in the UK, and Faye Bright basically discovers that she's witches. So it's supposed to be warm, witty wartime fun. I have actually, again, quickly checked on Goodreads, and the first line of the synopsis says that it is for fans of Terry Pratchett. So I have really high expectations for this one. I think this could be really good fun. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And the final one is The Absolute Book by Elisabeth Knox. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Again, I'm not 100% sure what it is about, but in her little letter, Elisabeth writes that the main character of The Absolute Book, Taryn Cornick, is a woman who is unsatisfied with the fact that her sister's murderer was tried for the lesser charge of manslaughter. But Taryn is being hunted herself by creatures not of our world looking for something, an object, a book. It is an arcane thriller, a fantasy, an adventure story, and a recovery narrative. So I'm intrigued by all of that. In particular, there's also a mentioned letter that the author has always been intrigued by novels like Shadow of the Wind, novels with a scholarly hero and peopled by groups with competing interests related to the thing they're trying to find, stories full of reasons for strangers to talk to one another. I'm intrigued again because Shadow of the Wind, I really love that book. So yeah, an arcane thriller is not what I would typically go for. So again, it forces me to a bit get out of my comfort zone and try something new. And again, the book is just beautiful, right? I'm really happy with that. All right, so next one. Last book you said you read but didn't. That's an interesting one. I obviously don't do that anymore because I don't really care if people have read books that I haven't read. I'd rather talk about it and see whether that interests me. But in high school, I did do that. I did say that I read a book that I did not. And it was because, so obviously I was in a French high school and I had a couple of extra classes of English, and I had in particular an English literature class where we would read some of the classics like Shakespeare, George Orwell, Animal Farms as well. And gosh, one of the books just traumatized me. It was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. And it's supposed to be a really good book, right? But we were obviously reading it in English and my English was just not good enough to follow what was going on. And so I had to pick up the dictionary way too often, which just ruins the experience of a book. So in the end, I ended up just, you know, Googling everything and trying to figure out what would happen. So I know the story, but I haven't actually read it. I think I read probably like a third of the book and then gave up. And every time I see that book now, I'm sort of traumatized because I think about that teacher that I really disliked. Number 5 is last book you wrote in the margin of. I just don't do that. Like even for my university books, I didn't do it. So yeah, I don't have one. I'm sorry. Number 6, last book you had signed. So obviously like all the books actually that come with my Chronicle box had a signed book plate, but I don't really consider that like signed. So in this case, I'm really thinking about, you know, going somewhere and have the author sign your book. And so for this one, it's The Athelson's Fate by Robin Hobb. That was the last book of Fitz and the Fool, the last trilogy of the Realm of the Elderlings, and I loved the book so much that, you know, I waited 20 to 30 minutes to get her to sign the book. And so it is signed to Dominic Robin Hobb, and it looks so beautiful. I think Robin Hobb should basically sponsor this video. All right, number 7, last book you lost. It's not actually really lost because I know where it is, but I lent one of my books to a former colleague and I don't think I'm ever gonna get it back. The book was Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, and it's brilliant. I really recommend it to anyone. It's both for a professional context or a personal context, how to better communicate with people. And it starts with a really like nice premise of everyone is inherently good. They're trying their best. They probably have a lot of things going on in their lives. And so if they are angry at you, if they, you know, are talking to you in an aggressive way, it might have absolutely nothing to do with you. It might just be that, you know, something is triggering an emotion in them that they are then sort of verbally expressing. And so the whole book is about tools to try to diffuse this sort of situation and communicate without any violence to really understand the other person. And it's amazing. I actually really want to pick up the French version because the book has a lot of discussions around the words, the exact words that you're using, and obviously it depends on the language. So in English, for example, one of the things that I remember from the book is that if you're saying, why did you do something? It's going to sound very accusatory. But if you're saying, you know, how come this happened? Then it's not about the person doing something. It's about, okay, let's try to understand the situation. So it's this sort of like, you know, bits and pieces of advice on how to better communicate. And it's a gem. Like, honestly, everyone should read this. The world would definitely be a better place. Number 8, last book I had to replace. So I've actually already talked a bit about this book, but I'm gonna, you know, re-talk about it. Robin Hobb. This is the first trilogy. I did not actually, even though I'm a massive fan of The Realm of the Elderlings, I do not have the first 2 trilogies in my flat. And that's mostly because when I started reading them when I was, I think, about 18, my parents started reading them at the same time, and so they have the copies and I don't. And also I read the first 2 trilogies in French, and so that's also why I want to reread it in English to sort of see the difference. I read the last trilogy in English and it was absolutely fine. The names are typically translated very closely. Number 9, last book you had an argument over. So the main reason I started this channel is because I don't have that many people to talk about books, so I don't really have an argument per se. I would say the slight disagreement I had was on the Stormlight archive. One of my friends strongly believed that Dalinar is the best character ever, and that's just not true. It's Kaladin. Kaladin is the best. I'm sorry. And number 10 and final question, what is the last book you couldn't get a hold of? So I don't really have a problem for that. Living in London, you have access to so many bookstores, and obviously Amazon as a last resort sort of works. I'm trying not to buy to Amazon to really support independent bookstores. Bookshop, for example, is a great one. Blackwell's as well, I really like. Foyles, Forbidden Planet. I'm gonna put all those links below. The last book though that I didn't find the last time I went to a bookstore was The Sword of Kaigen. I've heard really good things about it on BookTube. I believe it's an independent publisher, and that might be why I can't easily find it. So I think ultimately I will have to go on Amazon and see if I can find a copy there. So that's it. That was the 10 tags. I thought that was quite fun. I hope you had fun watching it. Please feel free to use the tag as well if you have your own channel. And if you've read any of the book that I mentioned, please leave a comment and let me know what you thought of the book. I'd be really happy to start a discussion on that. Bye bye!